Borders and boundaries. What's the difference? 20 years of fame and fortune is where some of us ride. This is what we often get told in various states. We have soul information on the line for so many souls who want to have their fame and fortune realized in the vision of soul guidance. The professionalism that people come through with is almost guaranteed to rise when you look at yourself in the mirror and say, yes, I've made it. How many people are aware of the way that we create and the ways in which we limit ourselves in the world of success? Success comes in many ways. Brenda's made it to that point where she has access to soul level understanding and guidance and wisdom. What that means is her soul has to align with those who are aware of what that actually means. She's already decided to put up her dukes with some souls who claim they have better information for her. And she says what she does is she aligns in collaboration with those souls. So this is the nature of where many are. They're in competition for success versus a collaboration of honor. That's how we create in soul level love. It's always there. But when we bring it to the screen, people start to wonder, what does that mean? To honor someone is not to degrade them in their minds, correct? Their hearts or their souls. This is where we come into union with those souls who say, I'm the badass of society and I don't give a damn what everybody else thinks. Those souls are caretaken in their hearts and their souls by their own vision of who they are, correct? They often have that idolized vision of, wouldn't it be great to just spew out whatever hatred that you want and have it just be whatever it is? That's not the point of people allowing others to have their own emotional outburst on the screen, correct? Do you think Brenda would get very many clients if she was telling people that their souls are vibrating in the nature of what? Shadow vision? Hellish demons? Right? That's not what's happening. I know many people who are in the vision of, I just let my freak flag fly. But what they are saying is, in essence, there are those of us on this plane who are there to initiate the peaceful process of transition into who we are as souls, rather than just personality types, perhaps, or personalities on this plane. Now, what that means is that many people now know we're talking serious business. So Brenda does put the limitations on who she portrays herself as. She's very wise, and the wisdom is granted to all of us if we are able to make it to that level of understanding of who we are. First, we go in and we align with the soul that loves and adores us for who we are as us in our moments. So it's not about degrading people, because if you knew what it was like to do this work, when you know it, versus I'm portraying myself as always there. That's not who I am. I have my angry moments. I have my moments of reflection. I have my moments where I say there needs to be a boundary placed around certain souls. Correct? Borders of wisdom. I won't go to those levels of love that think that they want to portray themselves as less than me. How about that for wisdom? Do you know how many people want to do that because then it grants them the anger that they're feeling? This has nothing to do with the borders around our hearts, does it? I don't have to pretend that I love what everyone else is doing. I don't have to pretend that everyone makes the correct choices in each and every moment. I go through the process of love for all of us in order for my own soul to bring through the wisdom, the guidance, and the vision that we are often either lacking in our hearts, right? It's our minds. So I go to the next level of love, which is beyond the mind, beyond the soul level understanding, right? It's of ego vision that many of us are portraying ourselves as. Brenda knows that she's wild and woolly in some ideas. But she's also very serious in her portrayal of who she is. And she's fun when she's around fun people. Do you know what that is? It means that it's the act that she puts on, correct? People are putting on acts. She's saying her truth. I vibe with those who are vibing with me, right? I just got off a soul session vision with another soul who is an influencer in her own right, in her own way, saying just take the blinders off and go full throttle. It means that when we place the boundaries around ourselves, we're afraid of showing others who we are. Now, Brenda knows what fear is, and that's when the soul level comes in and says fear is what we step into. Now, what you might find is that idea of I'm going to puff up my chest and pretend that I'm all that and more. Many are dealing with lower level understandings of who they think they are versus those who are rising out of the acceptance of who they are and going for the gusto of the moment. Okay? Many people have different ideas about what it is to be popular or to be portraying themselves in various ways. Brenda has her moments of fluctuation in the energy. She rides energy waves, and the vibration belt is where she's at. She's had so many souls who have come through saying, you don't portray yourself as all-knowing. You do. Do you know why? It's not for me to do that work. Just because my own soul would say this is what's needed to guide people in certain ways doesn't mean that your own soul would come through in that way saying you need to be doing this, this, and this, and this. We all have different ideas about what we are here to do and experience. And creating fun is part of it, is what many are saying. That's why our souls are saying, let's have a better experience of our lives, right? Some people are moving from despair to contentment, okay? That's part of the process that many are working through. So you can't go from one extreme to the other, right? This is when people are saying, oh, there's a bipolar vision or manic depressive or whatnot. Bullshit. We make our way along the vibrational fields of love always. Whether or not you perceive it as such is your own perception of who you are in your own moment and where you feel like the other person is in theirs. It doesn't mean it's a constant state of awareness, and it doesn't mean that it's always going to be granted as love from the personality typing aspects of who I am. When I come through with the vision of love for myself in many ways, when I'm just in my day-to-day routine, if I hear a certain message that sounds a little suspicious, right? Sounds a little bit lower level, I put on my INFJ Brenda hat and say, now I'm ready to rumble. And that means it's most often going to be looked at through the lens of the personality rather than the soul. If I want, I can tap into the nature of who I am as soul in the vision and receive the wisdom behind not only my experience of that perception, but the experience as it was from the other level of love that it came from, which is usually another soul. Okay? Now, or another aspect of who I am. This is what people need to ride that wave with. And Brenda is always on that idea of I'm not going to create the waves that are disparaging of other people for the most part. Because that is the ripple effect that I know very well. I've traversed it many times myself. I'm no angel vision. I don't walk around thinking everyone is perfect. I aim to lift others up if that's where they want to go. Others are perfectly content being the hell raisers that they are because they're not aware of what's actually going on the soul level. This is where I rise into the wisdom of the moment. Okay, so this is why so many people are up in arms about various circumstances in which those souls who are participating in those events have their own agendas, have their own ideas. And it doesn't mean that we don't do anything. It means that we have an understanding that there are characters in play that people don't even understand who are working their wisdom into the moment. Masters of illusion are what INFJs are in form, is what some would say. We're the illusionary visions of love, correct? We've had to battle our ways through life, knowing that we feel like we're chameleons because we're vibing off everyone else's energy. That's what that is. That's the nature of I'm an open book with the empathic vision. Those who say they're empaths have another thing coming if they've never even experienced the idea of channeling. That's when you really know you're working with energy that is not your own. And even then you have to discern the vision of, is it my own or not? Brenda is embodied by her own soul, so the vision is of love of all from that soul level vision. She created it beautifully, but it kicked her in the butt at one point, because once you start to vibe outside of a certain vibration, you can start to bring in that lower level understanding or the vibration of, oh, we're just of peace, prosperity, health, and love. That's where she really is. Because she hates causing drama. Do you want to know what it's like to enhance a system that so many others are utilizing to create boundaries for themselves and others? Now, when we think about the boundaries, this is not going to disparage the boundaries of who we are. This is about honoring them, correct? And others are saying we're breaking down the boundaries on soul, not on your life, is what many would say. Because do you know how many people are creating this idea that there are things to be afraid of on the other side of the veil? Brenda knows how to work with the unknown. That's what most people are afraid of. If you feel like your soul is less than, guess where you're going to be creating from? And I don't mean ego busting either, but that's another thing that we know how to do as INFJs in our prime. We know how to basically say, now's the time for you to have the mirror of love shown to you, and it's not going to be pretty. If you come into contact with her from this level of, I'm going to disgust you with my vision, right? That's not what she does. But it's the one thing that, it's like the claims are that it's ego busting. Brenda knows ego busting is very shallow vision. What we do is we adjust it internally by showing you other options or perhaps other perspectives that you yourself are not even aware that you vibrate in or that you're portraying yourself to be. Many are putting on mask of illusion. Brenda knows how to see the mask of illusion. What she's saying is, when you are in this world as a vibratory being, which we all are, in various ways, right? Those shades of gray can affect us. So now we're going to talk about the borders around our minds. That's really where it's at. Our minds are having a hard time keeping track of who's on our side or not. Brenda doesn't choose sides most often. She has her picks of where she wants to head, and usually it's aiming for progress, not perfection. She shows you how to enhance your vision to take the steps to higher levels of love of self or others. And when you do that vision, then you start to, it's like vibrate in the beauty of who you are. And that's when you start attracting the soul level understanding, because it's an attraction level of itself. To attract those souls who want to be around you because you give them peace, prosperity, health, and love, versus those that say, I give you the freedom to be whoever you are. Okay? There's a difference in how she creates her wisdom. Some people need that peace, prosperity, health, and love in their lives because they were denied that as children. Others are saying, I just want to fly my freak flag and not be condemned for it. You're all granted your wisdom wherever you are. It's just not aligned with certain souls. And that's why people are going to utilize that as an excuse to hold other people accountable for who they are, if they are in their wisdom of, I'm a victim now. Okay? This is why many are very much talking about the boundaries of soul as well. Brenda doesn't put on layers of protection because she's not afraid of who she comes across with. She's like, if I can handle anyone on this realm, I can handle anyone anywhere. And that's her soul. She doesn't buy into the fact that people are dangerous. Most people in this vision of love have been hurt. and hurt on a level that they themselves don't even understand. And when the anger comes from a place of pain rather than release of the pain, that's when we start to understand why people start to vibrate out of the love of soul, and they say, I'll just stick with my gifts as a human on this plane. That's beautiful. I'm human too, but I identify as soul enhanced. Okay? I don't vibrate in the idea of just letting everyone be who they are. I have children to guide. That's where soul guidance comes in. I get offered various solutions and paths forward that may or may not align with certain members of my family. And then I get to hear about the nature of why they disagree with who I am. And I have to say, that's their problem, not mine. Do you see how that path of discovery for myself never would have actuated had I listened to the family tree drama of my past? Those who say cut off everyone and then you go away, right? I had to isolate myself to a certain extent, but I was surrounded by love always because I kept my mind open to the nature of love. I don't enjoy everyone, but I understand how to be with anybody for the most part, not those who are aiming to kill people. That's a form of self-hatred. That's what people need to understand. Brenda knows what it's like to hear from the souls from those higher levels, and she definitely is hearing from those, quote, murdered victims, as well as those who did that vision. That's what's very hard. So think about the nature of what that lets you know about her. She's not afraid of who you are. Wherever you ride in your mind, whatever you think is creating a pattern of deception is where some people are. People are putting on false masks of deception. Brenda says, the deception that I offer you is just the fact that you think you know who I am. I'm an introverted wisdom keeper. I don't announce my wisdom every day. I don't announce the ideas of how I keep myself secluded from a lot of people in society. I'm not ignorant of the pain of the justice movement, but I'm also there to know how to rise out of it in a certain way of being, where I look at what's happening and see who is actually there to be seen and heard and looked at as wisdom, and those that I say this is just an absolute atrocity of a video is what some people would say, not knowing what's the difference between a boundary and a border. When people are placing boundaries around their minds, that's one thing. I won't allow certain people to come into my vibration is where others are, right? So there's a difference between I won't allow people who have created false crimes of justice in their minds. That's where some rise. I claimed it was for justice, but it wasn't of justice for all. It was for certain groups, perhaps. Others are saying they're claiming it is justice, but it's actually just a crime against other souls. We understand that distinction, correct? Do you want to know what it's like to know people who honor that idea that my vision of justice from the soul level has nothing to do with so many who are just vibrating in the idea of it's my way or the highway, and so I'm going to do some form of restorative justice? That's the beauty that we're actually working with many of those social activist issues. We're trying to restore humanity to its highest level. Does that make sense? Okay. Restoring the progress in who we are as humans first is what many would say. Others would go to the level of love of souls and say, we are all souls vibrating in the beauty of who we are, whether or not we agree or not. How many can't even make it to the idea that we're all humans? And why might that be? Perhaps it's because we're disparaging each other with the labels in which we place upon our hearts. Because when we're looking out and we see somebody and call them something derogatory. It's just as reflective of who I am in my moment. And that's why people are afraid of the soul level. It doesn't have to be a painful process. It can be an exploratory process with the idea of my barriers around me are just the limitations that I hold around me. Those are things that I can unwind or whatnot, because there's nothing wrong with them. They're just things that I move through, right? I move through the limitation of who I am. That's a barrier to soul. The boundaries that I place may be there for good reason. It depends on each soul. But that's usually a self-imposed idea. Either you or someone else has placed a boundary. Do you know what it's like to have your soul come to you, and they come to you with the most hated visions in the world and say, this is one of the most loving visions for all of us, because we get to tell each other how we learned from that soul and how we have discovered ourselves in a different way. It doesn't mean we have to like what happened, but we definitely came into union, right? Brenda had to deal with the idea of the Hitler soul, which has been destroyed for the most part due to the nature of the pain and the actuality of what that soul could or could not handle once crossing over into the other levels of love of life, right? That was definitely not the one that most people wanted to hear. But how many people are so condemned by those who say they honor that vision in its entirety, which would be something that they wouldn't know what that level of love was. Because when you go to your soul, and this is different, you're going to get aspects of you from different lifetimes as well. That's what's beautiful about soul, because you've also experienced so many things. So if you're limiting your experience here, you're also most likely limiting your experience in other realms of love of life from other planes, but potentially. It depends. So this is a higher level understanding that most people are probably going to be a little bit confused about. But that's the nature. Many are limiting their access to their soul. Your soul's always with you. Your soul's always guiding you. You just haven't reached that level of understanding of it yet. It's the wisdom within that many claim, and that is your beauty. What you haven't understood is there are higher levels of love for you to access for your vision. You are not just who you are here. And so that's why the barriers to soul are starting to come off for certain souls, and they are not prepared for it. That's when we can start to see the problems arise. So I'm not going to pretend that I'm all for joy and enthusiasm while I'm going through a process that's painful and that has me pretending that I'm all okay, right? I had to do that. I know how to get myself out of the vision that I'm doomed forever. I've always been reassuring myself. Others would say it's self-soothing. And that's what we want people to do. Aim high. Aim high. Can you get yourself to a place of, yes, I'm human and so are they? That's the nature of where people go, right? I'm human. We're only human. Brenda will say people are people in honor of Depeche Mode, right? And Martin Gore, right? Another INFJ influencer, right? He's of beauty. She knows his songs, and others would disparage certain songs, and she said that actually makes sense. But that's a side note, by the way. But that's where you'll see how I'm not just one thing. I also vibrate in the beauty of love of my soul just as I am. And my soul will tell me, this is where you're at. This is who you are. Are you holding others accountable for who they are? It's more like I want people to understand that we're not always vibrating in this idea of rules and laws. But if I say something that's disregarding of someone else's life as less than, I will own that vision and say, yes, that's not the case. Because I know that from a soul level, that's not how we portray ourselves here. Others will say we absolutely do. Those are the quote lightworkers that say they've got it all figured out. I'm sorry to tell you that's not necessarily the case. It's where they themselves are vibrating in that moment. It's still beautiful, it's still guidance, but it's going to have its own flavor of soul. And a lot of people are attracted to that kind of energy because it's still conditioned in the mindset of separateness. Or it's wanting to influence others to be more like itself. Okay, so this is why people have to decide what kind of barriers they have to their own soul. Brenda gets told about her, wild side on a different level. And then there's the calm, cool, and collected soul that's there to help others through their issues most often. But she had to put a boundary around her heart because she was hearing so many souls who were desperate for attention, in essence. And they were saying, this is about your own soul. So those who say, oh, I want my wisdom handed to me, that's another aspect. That's where Brenda knows how to tap into the nature of who we are as souls. That's your branding message. How to tap into the soul you as you, rather than what I was conditioned to think I needed to be in order to be. Many people are taking off the boundaries of their love as well. And then there is that idea of I'm going to be hurt, or it's going to be a hard, lesson for me to learn. We're not encouraging people to hold themselves less than. If you don't do that, you don't attract those who would treat you as such. What we do is we highlight the beauty of who we are, and then we aim higher and we hold ourselves accountable for any of those, it's like misdirections that we've honored for people. Some people are being misdirected into lines of work that are not necessarily their cup of tea. Okay, because people are following people who say this is how you reach success, or this is how you reach this kind of vision. And that's not necessarily the case. It's not always about following everybody else. It's not always about creating for everybody else. You create for who you are or who you were, is what some people are saying. Brenda was saying, good luck with that one. Most people don't want to be where I'm at. That's a fact. But what they do want is they do want their own soul's guidance coming to them directly. That's the difference versus I'm going to go out and start giving other people their own soul's wisdom, which means I have to hold myself open enough to say what needs to be said that's not from my own vision. Okay? If someone else's vision is I'm here to destroy the world so the world can see what it needs to see, that was one vision. Do you think that their highest level of soul would say that's the way to go? No, that's why those ideas placed in the apocalyptic visions that people are creating is being discouraged. And it's not the reality because that's the collective vision. We are not our own souls. So Brenda knows who she's creating with and why. She will say, oh, I have Erica Reitman on the line, this new influencer, right? The category of one. She vibes with all of us. We're all our own category. Give her a look-see. She's very controversial, but she acknowledges in her vision, I don't give two fucks about anybody else. And yet, that's not actually the case. It's more like the expression of who I am says that I can't worry about what others are thinking about me. And yet, in my honesty, I have an open heart and say, I do. I just don't let it take me there for too long. And her perception of the success of most of the successful businesses or people who are aligned with success don't actually tend to disparage and focus on degrading others. Because guess what that attracts to you? That's why when we come into this version of the borders around my heart, right? Borders are planted there in our minds only. And that's why it can get difficult for certain people, because if you start vibing with certain people, you're going to start aligning with certain people. And as Brenda has brought through from other soul sessions, alignment is not of like mind. You are vibing with those who love to be who they are. That's where Erica is. And when they do that, they start to be more of who they really are. They start to handle the world in a different way, perhaps. Or they come into a more calm and serene love for who they are because they're showing their authentic vision for this plane. And that's what we want others to understand, is that often the borders and the boundaries may seem similar, but there is self-imposed limitations on each of them. Okay? They don't equal each other. There's a vibrational shift for the borders and the boundaries. Okay? Are we agreeing on our borders? Right? This is the idea. Am I creating with everybody? Yes, on a certain level. But the boundaries are usually those that we have placed or others. And there can often be an agreement or disagreement about where that boundary is or what it should have been. And some people will say, I'm crossing over the boundaries. And others are working on placing those boundaries in place about what I'm willing to do and experience, even on the soul level. Brenda has some stories that will knock you out when it comes to what she's experienced. Okay, wild and woolly is an understatement for so many people. But in essence, we want everyone else to understand that you're going to get more and more influence when you are happy, perhaps. Do you know how many people say they get more influence when they're happy? And others will say, no, when I'm angry, that's where others are aligning with, because there's a just cause, perhaps. This is why we're talking about restorative justice versus the idea of false claims of justice. Excuse her. People will have a different idea about what justice is depending on the vibration in which they ride in. Just because you say it's justice doesn't make it so. Okay? Often people think justice is just revenge. That's what people need to ask themselves. Is this justice or is it revenge? Let's unpack that in another episode, right? So with that, I want to say thank you for watching, and remember always, keep true to your hearts and have a wonderful, wonderful day.